Chapter 23:41. Jojo. Emolien immediately realized that something was wrong with the little fellow. Although this little fellow's sleeping posture was not good, she would not be sprawled out in the middle of the carriage like this. Jojo, Jojo. Emolien leaped onto the carriage and hugged her to his chest. He lowered his head and called her name over and over again. After a long while, he did not see any reaction from his little wife. Emolien's heart started to panic. He hugged her and shook her gently. Jojo. What was going on? He checked and found that Jojo's body was very normal. Her breathing was also very calm. However, she did not open her eyes. It was as if she had completely blocked out his voice. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the vine in his hand. After waiting for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, Emolien pulled open the curtain and shouted at old Chen in panic. Go to the clinic. Go to the nearest clinic. Hurry. What happened, young master? Zhou Huan and the rest hurried over and asked with a serious expression. Jojo. Emolien lowered his head and looked at the unresponsive arbor. He was inexplicably flustered. In an instant, all his calmness disappeared. Is eldest miss sick? Zhou Huan asked loudly. Then what are we waiting for? Young master, why don't you take the flying beast back to the city? Previously, the young master had not been in a hurry, so he had accompanied the little lady on a scenic tour back to the capital. However, now that something like this had happened, he naturally had to hurry back to the city. They all knew that besides eldest Mrs. Ancient Fire Phoenix, the young master's flying beast was not simple either. Her words woke him up from his dream. Emolien's heart was in a complete mess. When he heard Zhou Huan's reminder, he hurriedly carried the warm and soft Jojo and jumped off the carriage. He waved his hand and called 7th Yan out. Everyone leaped onto the golden dragon 7th Yan's back. The golden dragon waved its tail in the air and flew into the sky in an instant. It really only took a breath. Old Chen then disappeared from the sight of the young masters. Old Chen was quite helpless. Looking at the empty carriage, he muttered to himself, "That old man is now going back to the border town? Or should we go back?" When the sky above the southern city was enveloped by the might of an ancient dragon, the guards of the South City, as well as the officials of the entire South City, all ran out of their mansions with shocked expressions on their faces. The golden dragon was flying so high that they couldn't see the people on it. They could only vaguely see that there was more than one person on the golden dragon's back. No, I don't know which senior was passing by. My little South City, please accept my respect, is willing to listen to your Excellency's orders. A civil official from the southern city trembled as he walked to the front row and said respectfully under the threatening gaze of the guard. A cold and anxious voice passed through the layers of clouds and pressed heavily on the hearts of all the officials. Within 15 minutes, gather all the local pill refiners, doctors, and pharmacists. Have them all come to the Yunheng Inn. He didn't have the time to waste on people. After he finished speaking, he carried Arbor to the Yunheng Inn where they were staying. The guards of the southern city immediately gathered the best doctors in the city and rushed to the inn together. Emolien held Xiao Mu's small hand and called out to her with knitted brows for a while. Then, with a gloomy face, he abruptly pulled open the door and glared at the crowd of physicians of all ages outside. Come in, all of you. See what's going on? Chapter 23:42. Yes. The group of physicians hurried forward submissively and checked Miss Chow's pulse. Then, they all looked at each other in bewilderment. This young lady's pulse is healthy and strong. Her body is very healthy. Then why isn't she waking up from her coma? Emolien roared. Zhou Huan and the others, who were standing at the door, couldn't help but shudder. Are all the physicians in South City here? Is there anyone better? The group of physicians suddenly wanted to cry but had no tears. Although Southern City was not big, the top few doctors in Southern City were also famous all over the world. Now, this handsome man in front of them had a terrifying expression, as if he had swallowed a meteor. It was as if they couldn't explain themselves, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to walk out of this inn. You bunch of quacks. If you can't cure me, Jojo, I'll decapitate all of you. Bang! The door was suddenly pushed open forcefully. Fong Su's wooden face suddenly appeared at the door with a trace of pleasant surprise on his face. This General Fong Su greets Your Highness the Crown Prince. Great, His Highness really came back as expected. He didn't stay in South City for so long in vain. He could finally return to the imperial capital and report to His Majesty the Emperor. Pa! One of the physicians was so frightened that he collapsed to the ground, the medicine in his hand spilling onto the ground. The person in front of them was actually His Highness the Crown Prince. Fong Su, immediately go and gather all the talisman masters near South City. And talisman masters. At this moment, Emolien suddenly remembered the soul exchange talisman that Jojo had mentioned before. His heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He inexplicably felt that Jojo's current situation should be related to that strange talisman technique. Talisman masters? Hadn't talisman masters disappeared from the divine continent for hundreds of years? Occasionally, the charm masters who were exposed would also be arrested and sentenced to death. Wasn't His Highness the Crown Prince making things difficult for him? Where could he find those troublesome talisman masters? What are you standing there for? Hurry and go! At Crown Prince Mo's roar, Fong Su immediately ran outside on all fours. How could the group of soldiers dare to continue staying here and endure this temperamental Crown Prince's torrential anger? They hurriedly turned around and ran after Fong Su. After Fong Su led the group of soldiers away, Emolien's cold gaze once again fell on the leading doctor from South City. What are you all standing there for? Continue the treatment. If you can't find a way, then think of a plan overnight. All the doctors were speechless. While Prince Emo was going crazy, Miss Chow pitifully watched as the Crown Prince brushed past her. She stretched out her two slender arms and grabbed nothing but air around the Crown Prince's neck. That's right. I'm just a soul right now. Even my connection with the sapling has been cut off. Lotus must be worried to death after discovering her abnormality, but she didn't even have the ability to send him a message. It's all because of that damned soul-departing talisman. Oh wow. Why did it fly out on its own? Why did it so coincidentally activate the talisman in front of her? Was it because of the golden talisman jade tome? Wasn't it? Arbor silently swallowed her bitterness and pitifully watched herself wander under the boundless sky like a wandering soul. Wandering from day to night, this feeling evoked an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if, a long time ago, she had also wandered like this. On the first day of wandering, Jojo missed Emolien. On the second day of wandering, Jojo still missed Emolien. Chapter 2343. The Mu family of the Divine Land was a talisman family. The talisman family was located in a green mountain forest. The surrounding mountains were the cultivation places of the Mu family. If one looked down from the sky, they would find that the whole talisman family was roughly divided into 4 areas like a large courtyard house. The south was the cultivation area, and the north was the meeting hall. The east was the rest area, and the west was a special elixir room for alchemists. On the Divine Land, almost every big family would pay attention to cultivating alchemists in the family since 100 years ago. These alchemists were naturally important to the family. The pills they developed might one day allow their entire family to rise to a whole new level. Therefore, alchemists always had a high status in the family. A group of disciples who were training their tendons and veins in the southern square suddenly heard a roar in the air and raised their heads one after another. Half of the disciples cheered when they saw him. Young Master is back. Young Master is back so early? Didn't they say that the task of collecting ores in the Ba Huang mountain range would take a long time? In the discussion of the disciples, Mu Xingchen put away the 6-winged blood lion with a cold face, waved his sleeves, and swept past the crowd. Why is young Master in such a hurry? I don't know. It seems that he is going in the direction of the Gilded Garden to find Madam. Passing through the veranda of the Gilded Garden, Mu Xingchen came to the front of the main hall and saw a pair of calligraphy couplets. The courtyard is full of elegant pavilions, and Xiaoyu is Gu Qingqiu. These words were written by his father, and they were like him. They were arrogant and freehand. Mu Qingya was sitting in the central room. When she heard the news that her eldest son was back, she couldn't sit still and quickly stood up. As soon as she went to the door, she saw Mu Xingchen stride in. "Mother." Mu Xingchen stopped and bowed slightly. Mu Qingya looked like she was in her 30s. Her face was gentle and soft, and there was a hint of melancholy in her eyes all year round. When she saw her eldest son, there was a bit of joy in her eyes. Her voice was also soft and soft. "Chen, didn't you say that this trip will take more than a month? You are back so soon. Do you want to give me a surprise?" Mu Xingchen said respectfully, "It's my fault for making mother worry. I encountered some matters and had some doubts, so I traveled day and night to come back and see mother. Chen, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll tell you everything I know." Mu Qingya stepped forward and took her son's hand. She smiled and sat down with him on the carved string chair. "Mother, you mentioned to me before that when that person left the Mu family, she was 3 months pregnant?" Mu Qingya nodded affirmatively. "Yes, I did." "Chen, why are you suddenly asking about this?" She lowered her eyes and let out a long sigh. "When your biological mother broke up with your father and left the Mu family, you were only 5 years old. Sigh, this has always been a regret in my heart. For the sake of the Long family, big sister Yun actually, sigh." Mu Qingya saw that Mu Xingchen did not pursue the matter, so she said, "Child, if you have any questions, you can ask mother. Mother will tell you everything she knows." "But what you did to your mother?" "No." Mu Xingchen interrupted Mu Qingya and coldly said, "I don't want to know everything about her." Chapter 23:44. You silly child. Mu Qingya patted his hand unhappily. "I've been telling you this all this time. I've been telling you that your birth mother must have her own reasons for abandoning you. Anyone can blame him, you can't blame her. That's your biological mother. Child, this blood relationship can't be cut off. You might not have any recollection of it, but I can tell you with certainty that before your birth mother left the Mu family, she loved and cherished you. Her love for you is definitely not any less than mother's love for you." "Mother," Mu Xingchen interrupted her coldly, his eyes cold and aloof. Okay. I won't say anything else." Mu Qingya sighed and looked at him worriedly. "You've grown up now and have your own thoughts and plans. But I want to tell you one thing. No matter how old you are, you're still my child. There are some things you don't like to hear, but I still hope you can listen to them." "I understand, mother." Mu Xingchen nodded lightly. Mu Qingya asked again, "Good child, why did you suddenly mention that she's 3 months pregnant?" "Mother, 2 days ago, in the 8 Desolate Mountain Range, I met a girl about Ro Yi's age," Mu Xingchen hurriedly said. "The moment I saw her, my bloodline involuntarily resonated with her." "What?" Mu Qingya widened her eyes in shock, then a hint of joy appeared on her face. You mean, yes." Mu Xingchen nodded with certainty. "I suspect that she's my biological sister. It's that woman who took the child away from the Mu family." Mu Qingya jumped up from the bench and said excitedly, This matter is too important. I am going to tell your father now." "Wait. Mother." Mu Xingchen also stood up and grabbed Mu Qingya's sleeve. "Let's talk about this later. There's no rush." "How can there be no rush?" Mu Qingya said anxiously. "Do you know that even your grandfather sends your 7th uncle everywhere to look for this child all year round? I didn't expect that she would come here by herself. You really saw your sister with your own eyes." Mu Qingya's eyes lit up as she looked at Mu Xingchen, the gloominess in her eyes instantly disappearing. "Yes." Mu Xingchen could feel his mother's joy, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. "She's very beautiful. I've never seen such a cute girl before. She's also very powerful." Mu Xingchen looked at Mu Qingya. Mother, shall we bring her back? Good, good, good. Good, good, good. Mu Qingya nodded repeatedly, and she couldn't help but tear up a little. Your grandfather will be overjoyed when he hears this news. Let's go and talk to your father. When your grandfather comes out of seclusion, tell him the good news. The fondness in Mu Xingchen's eyes dimmed slightly. Mother, what if she hates us? How come? Mu Qingya was shocked and hurriedly turned to look at her son. Son, did something happen? A hint of hatred surged in Mu Xingchen's eyes. It must be that woman. It's her. She was the one who taught my sister to hate us. It must be her. It can't be, it can't be. Mu Qingya hurriedly waved her hands in denial. You must have misunderstood your biological mother. Chapter 23:45. Child, listen to mother. Your biological mother is a straightforward and magnanimous person. She definitely wouldn't teach your sister this, Mu Qingya said with certainty. No matter how great her hatred for our Mu family is, she won't blame her on your sister. She won't transfer this hatred to your sister and let her bear all of this. Mother, don't put in a good word for her anymore. All these years, I've seen clearly and know what kind of person she is. Mu Xingchen sneered. You. Mu Qingya was so angry that she stomped her feet and sat down heavily with a sulk. Mu Xingchen turned and bowed to her. Mother, my sister holds a deep grudge against our Mu family. Don't tell father and grandfather about this for now. We'll talk about it after I find her. Mu Qingya turned and glared at her son. How can we do that? Your father must know about such an important matter. Let's put off your grandfather's matter for now. All right then. I'll have to trouble you with this matter. Mu Qingya sighed and stared faintly at the tall and handsome young man in front of her. Chen, come here. Mu Xingchen walked over and sat down in front of Mu Qingya. Mu Qingya pursed her lips and reached out to hold his hand. I raised you single-handedly, so I know what kind of person you are. You're a good child. It'd be even better if you could let go of your resentment against your biological mother. I don't blame her. It was just that she didn't deserve any of his attention. To him, the woman who had abandoned his son when he was young was nothing more than a stranger in the past. But now, because of his sister's hatred for the Mu family, he had no choice but to face that vicious woman head-on. If it weren't for her teaching, how could his sister harbor such great enmity against the Mu family? Mu Qingya knew that this child had a deep grudge against Long Chuyun, and it wasn't a problem that could be solved with just a few words. She could only subtly talk about Long Chuyun in hopes of alleviating the child's hatred for his biological mother. Mother, I plan to spend some time by her side until she's willing to come home with me. What do you think? Mu Qingya looked at the child she had raised with a gentle gaze. She nodded and said, She's your biological sister, so of course you have to bring her back. If she's not willing, you can spend 1 day, 10 days, or even 100 days to let her know that you truly like her. Let her feel your kindness. Mu Xingchen's lips curled into a faint smile. Mother, I think so too. I'll talk to your father about this. Just do whatever you want to do. I'll support you. Thank you, Mother. Silly child, there's no need to thank me. Mu Qingya smiled. Then I'll go back and prepare. I'll bid farewell to Mother for today. After a while, I'll definitely bring sister to see you. Okay. Mu Qingya's eyes were full of smiles as she nodded and watched the young man leave. Madam, how can you bear to let eldest young master leave just like that? A young maidservant at the side puffed up her cheeks and said, Eldest young master is our Mu family's young master. Just now, his words clearly showed that the girl didn't like him very much. If we let eldest young master go to that young lady's side, wouldn't he suffer all kinds of grievances? What do you know? Mu Qingya glared at her in annoyance. How can the kinship between siblings be broken up by a few words of scolding and beating? I believe that Chen will definitely bring little sister back. Chapter 23:46. A neat woman in a green flowery coat walked in and smiled. "Song Lu, don't you know our madam? Anything that can make eldest young master happy, she will raise her hand in approval." Mu Qingya glanced at her with a smile. "How's the shop?" "Madam, don't worry. It's just a small matter. Kai Dai Veranda's business is as good as ever. We've also found out where the two troublemakers came from. Our Kai Dai Veranda's service is top-notch. In the imperial capital, no one dares to be the first if we're recognized as the second." Mu Qingya looked at the woman speechlessly. "You're the only one who likes to joke around. There's no such thing as being number one forever in this world. Anyway, you just have to put your heart into whatever you do." "Yes." Mu Qingya picked up a thin yellow booklet and handed it over. "It's winter now. These are the dishes that Kai Dai Veranda will be focusing on for the next 3 months. Take a look." "Yes, madam." The woman in the green flowery coat took the booklet with a smile and said happily, "With madam's help, I guarantee that Kai Dai Veranda will become popular in the imperial capital again. Qing Nyang, keep a close eye on Precious Painting Workshop." "Madam, don't worry. The flowers that madam brought over earlier have already been made into the first batch of jewelry. They're selling very well." They chatted for a while. Mu Qingya was a little tired, so she waved her hand and dismissed everyone, leaving only Tsong Lu to serve her. Mu Qingya picked up a cup of tea and put it down heavily. She said worriedly, "Men, send a few people to follow young master. If there's any news, report it as soon as possible." With Chan Er's cold personality, it was a little inconceivable for him to coax a little girl back. If it really didn't work, she would have to make a trip herself. "Madam." The little girl named Tsong Lu pursed her lips and said, "She's just a girl who's been wandering outside for more than 10 years. Aren't you worrying too much?" "What girl?" Mu Qingya glared at her coldly. "Don't be rude. I've spoiled you all too much and don't know the rules at all." Tsong Lu's eyes reddened. She hurriedly knelt down and lowered her head. "I'm sorry, madam. Tsong Lu said the wrong thing." Tsong Lu shouldn't have said such disrespectful words to Mississippi. Mu Qingya didn't say anything else. She just picked up the teacup again and glanced at her indifferently. Under the vast sky, the starlight formed a long river. Miss Chow had already been wandering around for 4 days. She didn't know how many places she had wandered through in her muddle-headed state. She only felt that she was extremely miserable. It clearly had consciousness, but it did not have a physical body. It was a pitiful soul that wandered through the endless night until dawn, when the first ray of morning light illuminated the earth. What entered Miss Chow's eyes was a vast expanse of snow. The scenery of a world of ice and snow was imprinted in her eyes. "Have I wandered to the end of the world?" Miss Chow cursed inwardly. In any case, her body was floating around uncontrollably. During this period of time, she had thought of contacting Little Tree. However, after several futile attempts, she gave up on the idea. What the hell was this soul-leaving talisman up to? Could it be that she left her body to cultivate her spiritual sense so that she could wander around everywhere? He wondered how Lotus was doing. She wouldn't go crazy, would she? Her poor Lotus. Miss Chow floated all the way as she watched the sun rise above the snowy plains. It was like a small half of a salted egg yolk pressing against the horizon. Rumble. The sound of horse hooves rang out in the empty snowy plains. Chapter 23:47. Arbor floated and wanted to turn her head to look. Unfortunately, the little transparent body was not under her control at all. It continued to float forward. Then, she saw a large group of people riding on spirit stallions rushing past her. The people on the horses were all wearing black cloaks and their hair was braided. Looking at their speed, they were heading towards the glacier in front. The leader of the group had a shiny black braid swaying around his waist. He rode on a polar ice wolf and led the group of horses as they charged forward furiously. Miss Chow floated forward aimlessly. To put it in a funny way, the speed at which she floated was not the least bit slower than the polar ice wolf. She did not expect that after leaving her body, her soul's speed would gradually increase. Boom, 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 boom. The large group of people on the ice field made an extremely strong tremor. Arbor looked down at the transparent ice under her feet and then looked up at the group in front of her who was maintaining a constant speed. Such a big movement, but the ice field did not show any signs of cracking. It could be seen that this ice field was not formed in 1 or 2 years. The layer of ice below was probably a few stories high. Float, float, float. Boom, 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 boom. Float, float, float. Miss Chow waved her small hands and spun her small body. She increased her speed and floated to the side of a lady on a horse. At first glance, she felt that this lady was a little familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen her before. The entrance to Heavenly Ice Snow region is in front. Everyone, put in more effort, hurry up. We must reach it before noon. It will be even harder to travel at night. Yes. Everyone replied in unison. Heavenly Ice Snow region? Chow Mu was startled, and then she thought excitedly. Oh, so this was not the end of the world. She floated all the way to a place called Heavenly Ice Snow region. She wondered which part of the divine continent was this? Knowing the name of the place was not of much use to her. Her soul floated uncontrollably, and who knew where she would go next? But looking at the current situation, it seemed that she was also floating towards Heavenly Ice Snow region. Cough, cough. The woman on the horse was wearing a thick furry cloak, and her head was wrapped in a thick velvet cloth, only revealing a pair of pretty eyes. A gust of wind hit her in the face, causing her to cough repeatedly. When she inhaled, she felt as if a cold wind had been poured into her lungs. It was so cold that she felt very uncomfortable. Princess, it will get colder if we go further in. I'm fine. The woman gritted her teeth and urged her horse to gallop forward to catch up with the group in front. However, her physical strength was not as good as those men, so she slowly fell to the back. Arbor floated beside her. Looking at her little face that was red from the cold, he lowered his head to look at his own transparent little hand. This place was too cold, and they had been traveling for a long time. It was impossible to constantly mobilize spirit energy to protect one's body. Over time, the cold air would enter one's body. If one didn't have good protective measures, even the strongest person would easily fall sick. The closer they got to the Heavenly Ice and Snow region, the colder the aura became, causing them to shiver from their bones. Akir's lips were completely purple from the cold. She took a large cloak from her inner world and draped it over herself. She was now wearing 2 cloaks and a large cloak, but the cold air penetrated through the layers of clothing and went straight to the depths of her heart. Chapter 23:48. Her cultivation level wasn't high, and she had insisted on following them on this trip. She had long expected to suffer hardships, but she didn't expect it to be so bitter. The group of men in front of him also used their spiritual power to warm their bodies. However, in such a world of ice and snow, the occasional warmth didn't have much effect. Instead, after warming up, they would feel even colder. That bone-piercing coldness penetrated their clothes and entered the deepest part of their hearts. After a wild gallop, the group finally arrived at the entrance of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region under the lead of the polar ice wolf. They had madly galloped for nearly 4 hours on this stretch of road. It was really a case of a horse running to death by looking at a mountain. The glacier was clearly right in front of them, but who knew that it would take so long to run? At noon, they gathered at the entrance of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region. Ming Yas tried his best to suppress the restless roar of the polar ice wolf beneath him. He raised his eyes and coldly gazed at the beautiful scenery of the glacier towering into the clouds. The scenery in front of him was truly spectacular. At a glance, countless large and small glaciers appeared in front of them. The entrance to this place was a glacial canyon. On one side of the ice wall were carved with uncanny craftsmanship, Heaven of Ice and Snow region, land of extreme cold. On the other side were carved, 10,000 people enter, 10,000 people die. Only an extremely thin crack was left in the middle for people to enter. These 2 lines of words were carved crookedly. Clearly, they weren't carved by the same person. Who knew which almighty cultivator was so sick as to leave these words on the ice wall of the Heaven of Ice and Snow region? Leave the spirit stallions here. Ming Yas made a decision and jumped down from the polar ice wolf. We must enter on foot. Yes. The ice layer inside was too thin. Once it broke, what they would face would be an extremely terrifying glacier attack. Akir was wrapped in 2 cloaks and a large cloak. The corners of the large cloak were dragging on the ground. She walked forward while panting. Brother Yas, should we walk in? Ming Yas glanced at her indifferently. Yes. His gaze was still fixed on the 2 smooth ice walls. At this moment, Akir also saw the crack between the 2 ice walls in front of her. The uneven ice surface was very eye-catching under the sunlight. There were also many sharp icicles left on the 2 ice walls, which looked very aggressive. Let's go. We must find a place to set up camp before it gets dark. The little girl floated over and hovered beside Maya's. At this moment, she saw clearly and recognized Yasi. After all, he had clashed with this fellow several times, so it was impossible for him to not remember him. However, he didn't have a deep impression of it. Of course, she wasn't familiar with Akir. As for his brother Yas, Auber didn't recognize him at all. What was this guy full of violence doing in this world of ice and snow? Your Highness. Yas raised his hand to stop a guard general from speaking. He suddenly turned his head and shot his gaze in the direction of the young lady. There was nothing there. How could it be? ACI frowned, then turned around and said, "Let's go." The group followed his footsteps and quickly walked toward the crack in the ice wall. The little girl floated along, occasionally looking up at the ice wall that reached into the blue sky. What a tall ice wall! What was waiting for her in this world of ice and snow? Chapter 23:49. There were still a few rays of sunlight, but when they landed on the ice wall, they were so faint that they were almost negligible. They couldn't melt the thick glacier in the slightest. The group didn't speak. Instead, they looked focused and even a bit nervous as they quickened their pace and passed through this steep crevice. Creak. A soldier who was just about to lift his leg turned green, and he slowly put down his left leg. When his gaze shifted to the side and a ball of snow-white mink fur suddenly jumped out, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Just now, his heart had almost jumped out of his chest. That damn creak made him think that the glacier under his feet had cracked. Ah, what a cute little thing. Akir's pale face suddenly showed some joy. Ollie took a few steps forward, picked up the little thing, and handed it to Akir. Keep it for now. When it's fat, it can go with wine. Auber! Exclamation point. You bunch of cold-blooded people actually want to drink with a mink that doesn't even have a bit of meat. That snow-white little mink's hind leg was still bleeding. It looked like it had been pierced by an icicle. At this moment, it was lying listlessly in Akir's arms. Akir pursed her lips and smiled. She raised her hand to comb the little white mink's fur. The palm-sized ball was white and tender, and the mink fur on its body was very soft and slippery to the touch. Auber pursed his lips, somewhat disdainful of Akir's smug look. Wasn't it just carrying a little mouse? Was there a need to be so happy? It was as if she had never seen the world. Strange, why wasn't she floating anymore? A trace of confusion flitted across the little fellow's eyes, and she waved her little arms and legs. Keep floating. Why did you stop here? Hurry into the ice heaven snow region. Since the golden talisman jade tome sucked her soul out and let her float here, it couldn't be aimless, right? If she wanted to float back to Emolien's side, she had to think of a specific way. The little fellow floated in the air and shook her little arms and legs. Something's wrong? Her soul body was uncontrollably rushing forward. Wait. Wait. What are you doing? Golden talisman jade tome, I'm breaking off relations with you. Damned soul-leaving charm, you. Don't cause trouble, don't cause trouble. F*CK. Her spiritual body was actually pulled over by an irresistible force, directly crashing into the little white sable's body. Me. I'll destroy your grandpa. The little fellow moved its little paws in confusion. It had a physical body now, but the physical body was a mink's claw. Ow. Especially that hairy face, which was still fused into a certain someone's proud chest, and that claw covered in danku was still rubbing her head with all its might. When the little girl completely woke up, she felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. She was so angry that she felt dizzy and had nowhere to vent her anger. She stretched out her little chubby claws and tore the woman in front of her. Hiss, ah! Akir shrieked and subconsciously withdrew her hand. The small marten nimbly kicked its legs and landed on the ground, limping towards the depths of the glacier. Damned little bastard, how dare you scratch my hand? Akir screamed angrily. Bring it back for me. I'm going to skin this damned mink alive and use its fur to make a cloak. Inhumane fellow. You actually want to capture me to make clothes? The little girl angrily ran away. Chapter 2350. She's so small that she can't even be made into a mink fur collar, yet you want to make a cloak out of her. Why don't you go and die? Thump, thump, thump. The little girl ran with all her might, already using all her strength to drink milk. Then, she discovered that the back of her neck was lifted up by someone. She turned her head and met a pair of cold eyes. This damned violent man. It's him again. The little girl kicked her two calves with all her might, looking like she was punching and kicking. The corner of Ming Yas's mouth twitched inexplicably as he met her pair of black, beady eyes. He saw that those beady eyes were filled with anger. Yes, it was anger. Why did he feel that this low-level little mystic beast was so human-like? This was really demonic. A little low-level mystic beast that had yet to develop intelligence actually felt anger? Brother Yas, I'm going to kill her. Miss Chow's angry curses turned into a squeak, and her little furry face immediately flushed red. F***CK, this little beast couldn't speak human language. This was a low-level little beast. Was there anything more tragic than this? Her soul was embodied in this little beast. If she was killed by that woman, would she be in danger? Would her soul be imprisoned in this dead little beast's body forever and not be able to come out? Roar. What's the point of bickering with a little beast that has yet to develop intelligence? Ming Yas glanced indifferently at Akir and flicked her dagger away with his fingertip. Akir angrily stroked the back of her hand, which had 3 bright bloody scratches, and stomped her feet in anger. Brother Yas, you'd actually rather protect that little beast than ignore the injuries on my hand? You're really getting worse as you live. How can you be angry with a little animal? Yas directly put the little white mink into his arms. All right, let's continue on our way. Akir gnashed her teeth in hatred. Seeing this, she had no choice but to take the medicine bottle Alex handed over and smear it on the back of her hand. The little girl lay in Yas's arms with a look of despair. Who asked her to discriminate against weak little animals? Now she had turned into a little animal. Her current appearance was so small, not even 1/5 the size of that white squirrel on Paradise Planet. Oh my God! It was the smallest mink she had ever seen. He did not even look as strong as New B back then. Sob, 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 of all people, why did you choose to possess such a weak mink? Chow Mu lay there in despair for a while longer until Ming Yas stopped walking. The group found a relatively flat area to set up camp. They cut off all the icicles that could injure or trip people and threw them to the side. An hour later, the camp was basically built. Dozens of barracks, big and small, were erected one after another on the glittering glacier. One of the soldiers took out a match from his pocket, but before he could light it, it was slapped away. What do you want? We're stepping on a glacier right now. Do you want the glacier to melt and collapse? Are they going to bury us all? How can an ordinary fire extinguisher melt a glacier in such an extremely cold place? The soldier shouted, unconvinced. Can't you see that the sunlight can't reach here? When Ali heard the commotion in the tent area, he hurried over and scolded the soldier who took out the torch. Rest early after eating your rations. We have to continue on our way early tomorrow morning. Everyone, listen up. Don't cause any trouble. Chapter 23:51. After Ali finished exerting pressure, he brought the guards back to Ming Yas's side and gave him a simple recount of what had just happened in the barracks. Ming Yas didn't pay much attention to it. He nodded and had Ali withdraw. After ordering someone to bring in a bathtub, Ming Yas called for a water spirit master to fill the bathtub with water. Only then did he have the person leave and take off his coat. His fingers touched the little mink in his embrace and he pulled her out. Seeing that the little fellow was curled up into a ball and sleeping soundly, he poked her head with his finger and placed her on the carpet at the side. Splash, splash. The sound of water made the tired Miss Chow lift her eyelids and slightly open her small bean-like eyes. Barracks. Why did she vaguely see the back of a person bathing? Miss Chow's small black eyes suddenly widened, and her little furry face was filled with disbelief. This perverted Ming Yas actually took off his clothes and took a bath in front of her? Did he still have any sense of shame? Sure enough, he was a pervert. A moment of carelessness and she almost grew a needle's eye. Miss Chow angrily stomped her leg and felt the pain in her small foot unbearable. She didn't manage to pounce out of the barracks. Instead, she rolled on the ground and made a little noise. Ming Yas turned his head and saw that the little white mink was currently limping towards the barracks entrance. He didn't seem to make any movements, only lightly waving his hand. A strong suction force pulled Miss Chow's body over, and she fell into the water. Ah! Pa 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 pa. This repulsive, damned stinky man actually made this crown princess drink your bathwater? I'll whip you to death, you bastard. The little paw exerted all its strength and swung towards that handsome face with a smack. When Gu Ying came in with her master's clothes, she only saw that little animal brandishing its claws and brandishing its fangs and claws as it slapped her master twice. She cried out in alarm and rushed forward. She quickly put down the clean clothes in her arms and reached out to grab Miss Chow's limbs. Ming Yas stared blankly and raised his hand to stop Gu Ying's actions. Pulling Miss Chow in front of him, he stared at her small eyes that were filled with anger and coldness. After looking carefully, he could not help but laugh. Gu Ying, don't you think that this little fellow is a little too quick-witted? I've never seen a low-level little mystical beast with such lively eyes. Your Highness, let this servant bring it down first. Yas waved his hand non-committally. Such a small thing can't hurt me. Gu Ying frowned and looked at the little white mink that was still in His Highness's hand and was still using its little claws to slap His Highness's arm. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but when the little white mink looked at him just now, it did seem somewhat human-like. Your Highness, this servant will help you get dressed. Nodding his head, Yas suddenly stood up from the bathtub. Abba stared at his bare chest with a dumbfounded expression. His gaze moved down 2 inches, and then he hurriedly moved up again. A pair of small meaty claws slapped at his head with all his might. Smack! The little guy exerted all his strength and leaped. He landed on the ground with a plop and rolled out of the tent with water stains all over his body. Perverted fellow! Who wants to see your moldy and stinky body? Her Lotus She wanted to go back and see Lotus. She wanted to go back and see Lotus wash her eyes. Ming Yas had a baffled expression. What was going on? Why did he see grief and anger in the little fellow's eyes just now? Isn't this mink a little too emotional? Chapter 23:52. Gu Ying was also dumbfounded as she stared at her mistress for a long while before she hurriedly helped her mistress put on her clothes. Your Highness, did you notice that the way that little white mink looked at you just now was a bit strange? You think so too? Gu Ying nodded solemnly. This servant feels like it was looking at a lecture. Ming Yasi. Thank you. This prince's taste isn't that heavy. After the grief-stricken Miss Chow rolled out of Ming Yasi's tent, she dug a hole in the glacier with all her might. No, she was shaving the ice with grief and indignation to calm her emotions. Calm down, don't panic now, don't panic. You must calm down. Talisman. 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 There must be a way to dispel this soul-leaving talisman. After it was dispelled, the soul would definitely float back on its own. Ah! The little fellow's claws dug into the ice with all her might, and her originally injured claws started bleeding again. When Ming Yasi walked out wearing an open-collared white robe, he saw the little animal crazily digging at something in front of his house. "What are you doing?" Ming Yasi picked her up and frowned at the bloodstains on her claws. "Gu Ing, bring the medicine." "Yes." Ming Yasi carried the little animal back to the tent, threw her on the carpet, and held down her struggling claws. "Don't move." This little fellow was quite troublesome. From time to time, she would spasmodically use her claws to scratch people's faces and arms. She really didn't know where he got the kindness to keep her by his side. "Akir is waiting outside to catch you and make you into a mink cloak." Ming Yasi's words caused the little fellow's body to stiffen slightly. The latter's hand paused. When the cloak was mentioned, the little fellow actually stopped struggling. As expected, she could understand human language. Ming Yasi glanced at her with slight astonishment in his heart, and then his mouth twitched rather speechlessly. What was going on? At this moment, he actually saw the meaning of "there was nothing left to live for" on this little fellow's furry face. As an ordinary mink, could this fellow's expressions be so rich that it bordered on the freaks? Pfft! Gu Ing immediately turned to look at His Highness with a look of astonishment. Master was actually amused by a mink? "Don't worry. As long as you're obedient, I definitely won't let Akir make you into a mink cloak. Your Highness, Lord Dongshan and Prince Chen of Congzhou want to see you." Although Ming Yasi had not returned to the underworld state for long, he had already grasped the situation in the Tsong state and the Divine Prefecture. He also knew who King Dongshan and Prince Chen were. He had also thoroughly investigated Prince Chen's background. As for the Eastern Mountain King, he was just a king with a different surname. Now, the Eastern Mountain King's mansion had few talents and was going downhill. However, it was better to meet the fourth son of the Duan family, who was now Prince Chen. Rumor had it that he was favored by the first emperor in the Tsong prefecture and was doing quite well. After bandaging the little fellow's injured leg, Yas, who had switched from carrying the little fellow to carrying him, had a mysterious smile on his face. Gu Ing stepped forward and drew the curtain for him. Carrying the little white mink, Yas exited the tent and slowly walked forward. From afar, he saw the face of a middle-aged man with a full beard laughing at him. "Greetings, Your Highness." The middle-aged man cupped his hands and smiled. "Greetings, King Dongshan." Ming Yasi glanced at the middle-aged man indifferently and sneered. "I heard that the winter hunt chosen by the great emperor of Congzhou is here." Chapter 2353. Ah yes. Wu Hang, the king of East Mountain, said with a smile, "I came to the winter hunt with His Majesty, but I didn't expect to see the Crown Prince of Mingzhou here." His Highness was quite a ruthless person. It was said that he had only returned to Mingzhou for a few days, but he had driven the dethroned Crown Prince, Ming Lang, off the stage and taken the supreme position himself. The king of East Mountain carefully sized up the expressionless Crown Prince of Mingzhou in front of him. Ming Yasi was not very interested in him. Instead, he looked around and asked, "Why don't I see Prince Chen?" Hearing this, the king of East Mountain looked a little embarrassed. Prince Chen had always been willful and reckless. He had walked to the entrance of the tent and said that he wanted to look around, but he had disappeared. Seeing his strange expression, Ming Yasi couldn't help but frown. King of East Mountain, although the heavenly ice and snow region is in your Congzhou, it has always been open to the 3 provinces. Does the Emperor of Congzhou not welcome my arrival? Ah, Your Highness, you misunderstood. The King of East Mountain hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, "The Emperor doesn't dislike Your Highness. He even wants to invite Your Highness to our camp to participate in this winter hunt." "Oh." Ming Yasi frowned slightly and said with a faint smile, "There's no need to invite me. We have other important things to do on this trip, so it's better to do it separately." If he found the divine flower of the snow region, he would not give it to the old man of Congzhou. Would he rob him or not? Seeing Ming Yasi's cold expression, the king of East Mountain did not persuade him anymore. Instead, he nodded with a smile and said, Since your highness has other important things to do, I won't delay your highness any longer. I'll go first. Before he could say the word, he was surprised to find that the crown prince, who had a calm expression in front of him, suddenly reached out and pressed down the restless little white mink in his arms. The furry little thing was twisting its small body hard, trying to break free from the crown prince's arms. Ming Yasi pursed his lips and held it down with a displeased expression. Hiss! Ming Yasi subconsciously withdrew his hand and looked coldly at the two small teeth marks on his palm. Ah, your highness, your hand! King Dong Shan exclaimed. When he looked up again, he saw that the little white mink had actually landed on the ground and pounced forward like a whirlwind. Ming Yasi, the East Mountain King, Guring, and the others all looked in the direction she was heading. They saw a young man in a light white robe, with his ink-black hair fluttering in the wind, slowly walking past them calmly. From where they were, they could only see the man's picturesque profile. The wind brushed past his clothes, accentuating his glass-like skin. His eyes seemed to flash with a myriad of luster. The little white marten's expression was as if it had seen a brother it hadn't seen for 800 years, causing the corners of everyone's mouths to twitch. Looking at her small body running like a thief, she raised a pair of small claws even more forcefully. The scene in front of him was quite comical. He felt that little marten was simply extending its claws at the man who was passing by, showing an expression of asking for a hug. Duan Yu. Tears were almost squeezing out of Miss Chow's beady eyes. She looked on helplessly as that guy nonchalantly walked past her without even looking at her out of the corner of his eye. Miss Chow felt unwell all over. Why the heck didn't he turn to look at her? Chapter 2354. Ming Yasi expressionlessly raised his palm, and a surge of energy flowed through his arm. A strong suction force pulled the little fellow into his arms again. He patted her head with a moderate force. What are you doing? This fellow actually dared to despise his embrace and wanted to defect to the enemy in public? Where would he put his face as the crown prince of Ming province? Even a small ferret dared to despise him. She simply didn't care about her fur anymore. Miss Chow indignantly struggled with her 4 small claws and turned her grief into strength as she howled. Ming Yasi, you're just a small ferret, but you've evolved. You can even howl like a wolf. Aba hopelessly closed her eyes and collapsed in his arms. How miserable. Duan Yu, that idiot, actually ignored her. Rather than staying here with this pervert, she dearly wanted to defect to Duan Yu's side. Duan Yu, Duan Yu, Duan Yu. Miss Chow was filled with resentment, and her 4 small claws restlessly wriggled. The veins on Ming Yasi's forehead throbbed, and he pressed down the little girl's head with a finger. He turned to glare at the Duke of East Mountain and said, "If the Duke of East Mountain doesn't have anything else to say, then see the guest out." His cold gaze swept over Duan Yu, who was walking away. As expected, the rumors were true. This Prince Chen was truly a willful person. He said he was here to pay a visit, but he left without even a greeting. The people of Tsong province were as abominable as the people of the Divine province. They were all ridiculous things. Seeing his displeased expression, the Duke of East Mountain could only bid farewell with a wry smile and leave with his hands cupped. With his tail between his legs, he dejectedly walked out of the camp. Prince Chen. The Duke of East Mountain, Wu Hang, looked exasperatedly at the young man waiting for him outside the camp. Why didn't you meet with His Highness the Crown Prince of Ming Province? Duan Yu nonchalantly swept him a glance. Not interested. If it weren't for the sake of the Emperor, the Duke of East Mountain really wanted to jump out at this moment and beat this willful fellow to a pulp. Since you're not interested, then why did you follow? Why didn't you tell the Emperor that you weren't interested back then? As long as Ming Yasi isn't an idiot, he won't walk into our Tsong province camp. Duan Yu said dryly, so this trip is futile. Since it was futile, it didn't matter whether he met her or not. Besides, he had no interest in meeting that domineering fellow. East Mountain King rolled his eyes speechlessly. In that case, let's go back to the camp. Yes. What happened just now? He seemed to have heard a nondescript wolf howl, whimpering like a kitten. The East Mountain King's lips twitched. It's nothing. It's just a small pet beast of the underworld crown prince. It suddenly opened its mouth and bit the crown prince. Oh. Duan Yu remarked dryly, even small animals don't like him. The Eastern Mountain King was speechless. Fortunately, the two of them did not meet. Given Prince Chen's irreverent attitude, it was hard to imagine what would happen if they met. The next day, Duan Yu put on his clothes dispiritedly, lifted the curtain, and walked out. He said to Xiao Kezi, who was accompanying him, "You stay in the camp. I'm going out for a walk today." "Ah, Your Highness, you're going out alone?" Xiao Kezi immediately tensed up. Duan Yu flicked his head. "With Your Highness's cultivation, what's there to be afraid of in a mere heaven of ice and snow? You don't need to follow me." "Your Highness, Your Highness." Xiao Kezi anxiously stomped his feet when he saw him riding a polar ice wolf into the distance. "Hurry, hurry and follow His Highness." Chapter 23:55. Hearing the slight vibrations, the third prince forcefully lifted the curtain and came out. He said with a dark face, "What is he trying to do now? Was it not enough for him to cause trouble every day? He actually rode a newly hunted polar ice wolf as a mount in this kind of place? Wasn't he worried that this vibration would cause the glacier to explode? This damned show-off maniac, he just wanted to let everyone know that he was the winner of this winter's hunt." Little Kezi hurriedly ordered a group of about 50 personal guards to follow. At the same time, the lifeless Miss Chow was tucked into Ming Yassi's arms early in the morning and followed the group to the depths of the Ice Heaven Snow region. Along the way, there were all kinds of strange ice stones and ice walls in all kinds of shapes and forms. The ice layer in this Ice Heaven Snow region had been accumulating for many years. Occasionally, a small earthquake would only cause some of the glaciers in the periphery to collapse a little. It wouldn't affect the large stretch of ice walls inside. Akir put on 2 cloaks and a large cloak, but she was still shivering from the cold. Although she was exhausted, she didn't forget to cut her flesh with her eyes. Miss Chow was currently helplessly hiding in Ming Yossi's arms. There was nothing she could do. With a ready-made human shield to block the wind and snow for her, she was naturally happy to relax. "Brother Yossi, where do you think this Ice Heaven Snow region divine flower will bloom?" Akir asked against the wind, but she felt the cold wind pour into her heart and lungs, causing her to shiver even more. Ming Yassi coldly looked up at the sharp ice walls in the distance and shook his head. "The Ice Heaven Snow region divine flower will belong to the fated one." Miss Chow, who was hiding in Ming Yassi's arms, was originally curled up listlessly. When she suddenly heard Ming Yassi and Akir's words, she couldn't help but perk up her ears, and her spirits were slightly lifted. Wait, what did she just hear? So these people came all the way to this Ice Heaven Snow region to search for the Ice Heaven Snow region divine flower? Could it be that the Ice Heaven Snow region divine flower recorded in the medicine scripture really existed? Her little head moved, and Miss Chow popped out of his chest, revealing her furry little head. Seeing her head, Akir's expression carried traces of disgust. She pulled out the dagger in her boot and said to Ming Yossi, "Brother Yossi, let me kill this little beast. I heard that it even bit you yesterday. You're the little beast, your whole family are little beasts." Miss Chow glared angrily at Akir with her small black eyes. When the latter saw the look in her eyes, she was taken aback. She pointed at Arbor and screamed, "This little beast can stare?" Ming Yossi, who had already observed the little fellow's various expressions, felt that this action of staring was nothing at all. The little fellow could even make an expression of spitting on someone's face with ease. What did the rest count for? This little beast was definitely out of the ordinary. Perhaps when it grew up, it could evolve into a spirit beast or even a divine beast. If Arbor could hear his thoughts, he would definitely spit at him and ask him where he got his confidence from. "Akir, why are you always angry with an uncivilized little beast?" Yas said impatiently. "Isn't little Gun Gun quite cute?" "Little Gun Gun? Who?" Abba stared blankly at Naas, who had casually given him a name. A mouthful of spittle almost landed on his face. Who are you calling Gun Gun? Your whole family is round Gun Gun. Little Gun Gun stare. Chapter 2356. Coughmaster, Little Gun Gun doesn't seem to like the name you gave it. Guring followed behind her master and could clearly see the grief and indignation that flashed through Little Gun Gun's eyes. Here it comes again. This little beast with an extremely rich expression was silently grieving and indignant in the crowd all day long. However, was the protest effective? Yas smirked and reached out to poke her round body. He said with a smile, Little Gun Gun, do you like the name Master gave you? I like your ancestor. Miss Chow knew that her resistance was futile, so she simply turned her little neck and pointed the back of her head at him. She also spat at him to express her dissatisfaction. ACI chuckled and raised his hand to rub her little head. He didn't know why, but the more time he spent with this little mink, the more he liked it. This little fellow was too nimble. Her eyes were full of hidden drama. She was definitely the smartest mink in the world. Big brother. Ali suddenly pointed at a slippery glacier in surprise. Look, what's that? Yas raised his eyes and looked in the direction he was pointing. He saw an extremely transparent flower that had shrunk into a ball standing at the edge of a precipitous glacier cliff. It was like a poisonous flower with a fatal attraction that was waving at everyone, emitting an extremely deadly charm. Miss Chow's little beady eyes were about to burn. It was the Snow Domain Divine Flower. It was the Snow Domain Divine Flower recorded in the book. Wow! Looking at its small appearance of having shrunk into a ball and facing the wind and snow on the precipitous ice cliff, it looked very spirited. Jojo inexplicably liked this flower. If this Snow Domain Divine Flower could be planted in her Paradise Planet, it might even make her Paradise Planet's spiritual power rise to another level. Although it liked extremely cold places, Jojo's Paradise Planet ignored elemental power. For example, some of the plants that like to grow in hot places were growing very well on Paradise Planet. However, Jojo's Paradise Planet couldn't be opened and Little Ball couldn't be contacted. Miss Chow frowned. Her beady eyes stared at the Snow Domain Divine Flower and were about to burst into flames. None of these problems could stop Jojo's desire to rob the Snow Domain Divine Flower. The little girl looked at her little paws and decided to make a move after making a plan. This was definitely not a sign of being afraid of death. This was IQ. Brother, this must be the Snow Domain Divine Flower. Ali exclaimed in surprise. He promptly kicked his personal guard. You, quickly go and pluck that flower. Be careful, don't damage it. Yes, yes. The personal guard hurriedly raised his head to take a look. Raising his chi, he shot towards the top of the ice wall with a whoosh. The little fellow looked at her small claws wrapped in thick gauze again. She secretly gritted her teeth and watched the guard who jumped onto the ice wall and leaped onto the cliff. The guard carefully walked to the edge of the cliff and picked up a small shovel. He seemed to be very cautious as he dug for the Snow Domain Divine Flower. Abba couldn't help but laugh when he saw his unfamiliar movements. With just this kind of herb-picking technique, she would probably laugh her head off. Using a shovel to put on an act, it was simply hilarious. What did these people think the Snow Domain Divine Flower was? That they could use a small shovel to dig it out like digging grass? They were simply idiots. Abba was still laughing at that person's IQ when a long black tail covered with barbs suddenly flew up from the depths of the cliff. Chapter 2357. With a swoosh, it swept the unlucky guy holding the shovel down. Everyone! Exclamation point. This unforeseen event happened too quickly, and no one could react in time. Even Doc Yass didn't see clearly what the tail that swept up from the bottom of the cliff was. The air was filled with a deathly stillness. Everyone looked at each other with a dumbfounded expression. Coward! Miss Chow struggled to climb onto Doc Yass's lapel. Doc Yass looked down at her speechlessly and then said to the two personal guards standing at the side, You two go. Yes. The two didn't refute and flew up the ice wall after receiving the order. One of the two pulled out the sword at his waist and looked at the cliff with vigilant eyes. But when he looked down, all he could see was a vast miasma. How could he see clearly? The other person squatted down cautiously and touched the snowfield divine flower with trembling hands. Miss Chow sneered in her heart. This guy is courting death. One person stood at the edge of the cliff with a sword and made a defensive action, using his eyes to signal the other person to hurry up. The personal guard squatting beside the snowfield divine flower took a deep breath and raised the small shovel in his hand to dig at the root of the flower. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. He felt as if the shovel had hit a piece of metal, and the recoil made his entire arm feel numb. This layer of ice is too sturdy, right? He thought to himself, but his arm inadvertently touched the snowfield divine flower's petal again. Miss Chow rolled her beady eyes. Careful! Ollie suddenly cried out in alarm. Everyone saw that at the edge of the cliff, a black tail covered with barbs quickly swung up again. Without any explanation, it dragged the guard who was standing on the side down. The other guard was even more miserable. After he touched the snowfield divine flower 3 times in a row, it suddenly threw a tantrum. The originally spherical petals suddenly opened up and rose several meters into the air. Baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, it swallowed the dumbfounded personal guard in one gulp. Akir stared blankly and subconsciously swallowed her saliva, clutching the cloak on her shoulders tightly. This snow domain divine flower could attack on its own? This thing was too terrifying. How did it suddenly rise so high? The blooming flower was actually able to swallow the bodyguard's sturdy body in one gulp. Akir gasped. Subconsciously, she didn't want to have any contact with this flower. Why, Big Brother Yas? Akir cried out in alarm but couldn't stop him in time. She could only watch helplessly as Dark Yas flew up and landed on the edge of the frozen cliff. At this time, the group of people under the ice wall had already seen clearly what was crawling out from the bottom of the cliff. The 2 huge antennae on its head swayed back and forth, and its black body was more than 10 meters long. Insect! Akir exclaimed and rubbed the skin on her hands. So disgusting. It was indeed very disgusting. Miss Chow looked at the huge worm up close and felt so nauseous that she almost vomited. Especially when Dark Yas was fighting with the big worm. Every time he slashed the worm's body, some green mucus would spurt out. Not only was it extremely fishy, but it was also extremely disgusting. In order to prevent her white fur from being stained by the mucus, Miss Chow curled up her entire body in Ming Yasi's embrace and used his clothes to cover her small body as she angrily shouted with a look of disgust. Chapter 2358. Didn't this guy know to put her down in a safe place and come up here to fight by himself? Smelling such smelly blood made her feel a bit dizzy. She had to admit that her current mink body was really weak. Rip. The earth spirit in Yas's hand transformed into thousands of earth blades that swept toward the big black worm at the edge of the cliff. That big worm had been guarding this snow domain divine flower all year round and had already reached the peak of the 15th level of the spirit realm. Even so, it was still nothing in front of Yas. Akir wiped away cold sweat and held her head high as she observed Yas, who was fighting above the ice wall. Seeing his thousands of earth blades fly over and surround the big black worm, cutting it into pieces without a word, she finally heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, she couldn't help but tense up as she turned to look at the snow domain divine flower that was silently standing to the side. Everyone had clearly seen the changes in the snow domain divine flower just now. This flower wasn't to be trifled with. If you wanted to pick it, you'd have to be prepared for the fate of being swallowed. The little white mink dug out from Yas's jacket and raised its paw to sniff the air with a look of disgust. Yas's expression was focused as a faint golden luster emanated from his palm and encircled the snow domain divine flower. Arbor watched coldly from the sidelines, but he was a bit surprised. He had long known that this guy was no longer the same as before, but he hadn't expected that he had already broken through to the divine realm. He must have used some secret divine realm technique to advance. Arbor snorted and disdainfully ridiculed in his heart. Then, He focused on Yas and used divine power to break the snow domain divine flower from the ice wall. This time, Ming Yasi had learned his lesson. He didn't touch the petals of the snow domain divine flower when he took them. Thus, the snow domain divine flower didn't react at all and showed no signs of going berserk. Akir and the others, who were looking up at Her Highness, all heaved sighs of relief when they saw this scene. Ali smiled excitedly. We still have to rely on Big Brother. Sure enough, Big Brother is the smartest. Ali laughed heartily. With Big Brother's help, wouldn't the snow domain divine flower be a piece of cake? Akir pursed her lips and smiled. She glanced bashfully at Ali and then raised her head to look at Ming Yas, unable to conceal the adoration in her eyes. When Ming Yasi completely removed the snowfield divine flower from the ice wall, a faint luster lingered around it. Miss Chow looked at the flower right in front of her, and a brilliant yearning immediately appeared in her eyes. Although Yas wasn't a very reliable person, he had dug out the entire snowfield divine flower. Every leaf and stem had been dug out perfectly. This was an extremely alluring snow domain divine flower. After being plucked, the snow domain divine flower lost its attacking power, leaving only a faint fragrance. The entire flower was emitting a faint glazed luster, which was very eye-catching. Roar! At this moment, an earth-shattering roar suddenly came from the bottom of the cliff. The personal guards below the ice wall all felt their chi and blood churn in their chests, and they couldn't help but take a few steps back. Those with weaker cultivation even spat out a mouthful of blood. Akir's and Ali's expressions changed. A mere roar could force back more than 1,000 people. This person definitely didn't come with good intentions. Chapter 23:59. The two of them looked up. Above the cliff, a towering, enormous head suddenly appeared. It climbed out of the boundless fog and leaped onto the ice wall with a whoosh. Its enormous figure appeared before everyone's eyes. Akir's expression tensed, and she subconsciously clenched her fists. The enormous creature in front of them looked almost as tall as a small building. Its two bell-sized eyes were emitting a faint red light as they stared at Ming Yas mercilessly. In front of this enormous creature, Her Highness simply appeared pitifully small. What kind of monster is this? Ali shrieked. Akir's train of thought was interrupted by this shriek. She abruptly reacted, and her expression changed dramatically as she said, "What are you all standing there for? Everyone, heed my command. Go up and help Her Highness fight." Yes. Although the personal guards were terrified, they also clearly understood that if Her Highness suffered any losses here, their entire family's lives would also be finished. Thus, although they were terrified, they still had to brace themselves and go up. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Several figures took the lead and leaped onto the ice wall, blocking Ming Yas's path. Ming Yas's expression didn't change. Instead, he coldly gazed at the monster that had climbed up from below the cliff. This fellow's head was a bit taller than a mountain, and there were several large black tumors on its head. It looked extremely terrifying. Its body was like a calf, but its tail was like a long scorpion's tail, and it was covered with dark spikes. Ming Yasi glanced at it and understood in his heart. It seemed that it wasn't that black bug that had used its tail to pull people down time and time again, but rather this giant scorpion monster in front of him. He had almost been fooled just now. Under Ming Yas's meaningful glance, those personal guards rushed up without regard for their own safety, and resigned themselves to their fate as the vanguard. Unfortunately, the giant scorpion monster's attack power was too strong. It didn't seem to move at all. With a curl and a pull of its tail, two figures were swept up by its long tail and torn into pieces with a ripping sound. What was even more disgusting was that the monster actually openly tore the person into pieces in front of everyone and stuffed them into its huge mouth to chew on them. Miss Chow took a look and expressionlessly retracted her head, almost vomiting. Disgusting thing, hurry up and deal with it. He was simply obstructing Jojo's view. Dark Yasa's eyes turned cold as he looked at the huge monster in front of him. More than a dozen personal guards rushed forward and were all killed without any distinction. Ming Yasi's long eyebrows furrowed slightly, and then he furrowed them deeply. This guy looked pretty strong. Dozens of bodyguards jumped onto the platform. This ice wall had a rather narrow space for them to fight. Dark Yas glanced at the personal guards who had jumped up, and with a sudden leap, he jumped down from the ice wall. The dozens of personal guards left by the cliff naturally became sacrifices again in order to ensure His Highness' safety. However, when the scorpion-tailed monster saw Dark Yas fleeing from the cliff, it let out an earth-shaking roar. A black tail pierced through several people's chests and climbed over their corpses. On the high ice wall, a large head covered in warts hung down, coldly looking at the people who were trying their best to calm down. Roar! The monster let out another furious roar, and its huge body suddenly pressed down. He actually jumped down to the bottom of the ice layer at the speed of lightning. Chapter 2360. Careful! Ye Li's expression changed greatly, and he commanded his personal guards to quickly spread out. Bang! The scorpion-tailed monster shook its large head, its eyes locked onto Ming Yas, who was protected in the middle of the crowd. Brothers, let's go! A leader of the personal guards roared. He led all of his personal guards forward like a tide, pressing in from all directions and surrounding the huge monster. Everyone mustered all of their spiritual energy and smashed it at the monster with all their might. For a moment, the monster was beaten to the point where its body trembled under the attacks of 1,000 people. It could only dodge. However, it was surrounded in the center of the circle. No matter where it hid, it would be beaten. Roar! With a furious roar, the people in the inner circle were all sent flying. Ming Yas's expression changed slightly, and he warned, "Block your 5 senses." This guy's voice also contains a trace of power. However, his warning came a bit late. Even so, over 100 people had already been sent flying by the huge monster's roar. They rolled back and forth on the ground with pained expressions, their eardrums seeming to have been pierced. The scorpion-tailed monster was very nimble in the center of everyone's attacks. With just a turn of its tail, a row of people were hooked by its barbed tail. Crack, crack, crack. It let out a furious roar and suddenly turned its head, spitting at the row of soldiers on the left. Buzz. Ah. Ah. Those personal guards didn't expect the monster to have a follow-up move. They were immediately stung by a series of small steel bees, falling to the ground with a thud, their eyes wide open. Even in death, they didn't understand what had happened. Miss Chow, who was hiding in Ming Yas's embrace, saw everything clearly. This old monster also raised a group of small steel bees. When he opened his mouth, he would spit them out. Those little things were all poisonous. They had the absolute right to insta-kill any great spirit master below rank 10. She couldn't help but rejoice in his misfortune. Ming Yas, this arrogant guy, was in for it this time. Hit, hit, hit. Hit with all your might. Miss Chow didn't mind watching the show. Her pair of black bean eyes were focused on the snowfield divine flower in Ming Yas's hand from beginning to end. Get out of the way! Yas bellowed. If this continued, the thousands of guards he had brought with him would all be killed by this ferocious giant beast. Ming Yasi naturally couldn't sit idly by and do nothing. With a leap, he arrived in front of the scorpion-tailed monster and raised the Snow Domain Divine Flower in his hand. Roar, roar, roar. When the scorpion-tailed beast saw the Snowland Divine Flower, it roared at Ming Yas with its eyes wide open. ACI was already on guard, so this roar had no effect on him. However, at such a close distance, Miss Chow, who had her ears covered, felt a little uncomfortable from the vibrations. She secretly complained about Yas's unkindness in her heart. I told you to put her down before you go up and hit her. He couldn't understand human language at all. Come on. Ming Yasi sneered and waved the Snow Domain Divine Flower up and down in front of the monster. Courting death. Arbor gave a small comment. Then, she saw Ming Yas throw the Snow Domain Divine Flower to the side of the ice layer without hesitation. Her gaze immediately followed, and her small mouth opened slightly. She looked at the flower that flew out with a pained expression and roared in her heart, what a waste of God's gift. A wasteful person like you isn't worthy of treasures. Leave it to Jojo to take care of. Roar. The little girl pounced out of Ming Yasa's arms. Chapter 2361. Taking advantage of the chaos, the little fellow rolled on the ground and nimbly rolled out of the crowd. On the other hand, Naas, who was completely engrossed in the battle with the scorpion-tailed beast, didn't even notice that something was missing from his chest. Roar! Lord Jojo ran wildly on the ice as if he was in high spirits. As soon as he opened his mouth to make a sound, he immediately realized that something was wrong and wished that he could hit himself on the head. F***CK, why are you so excited? What are you shouting for? The most important thing now was to keep a low profile. Let them fight. Fight. Continue fighting. Jojo grabbed the Snow Domain Divine Flower with his mouth and hid in a crack in the ice with a whoosh. Akira turned around and saw this scene. Shocked, she shrieked, "Little bastard! You actually dared to steal the flower!" A wave of spiritual energy shot over and exploded at Jojo's feet with a bang. Stinking woman! With a whoosh, Lord Xiqiao quickly jumped from one crack in the ice layer to another. Then, with the Snow Domain Divine Flower in her mouth, she ran for her life and ran away. That appearance and that figure were absolutely stunning. Ollie turned around when he heard the sound and saw the little fellow's figure. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he was so angry that he laughed. Heh, it's quite clever. It's a fisherman taking advantage of the situation, right? I'll chase it. That little bastard, don't even think about running away. Akira took out a bow and arrow from her inner world. Glaring angrily, she chased in the direction of Arbor with a whoosh. At the same time, Naas summoned the sword of Hades from his conscious. With a flash of light, it pierced through the beast's head and stabbed it back and forth a dozen times. The beast roared heavily, its voice reaching the horizon. Then, its entire body went limp and collapsed, smashing into the thick ice with a boom. This layer of ice instantly emitted a G-E-G-E-G-E sound, one after another, of shattering sounds. Because the commotion was too big, it alarmed the Zhongzhou Emperor in the distant camp. The Emperor ordered a few subordinates to scout for information. The Nether Yas summoned the sword of Nether Deity and chopped the giant beast into pieces. His body swayed along with it. Ollie hurriedly reached out to support her. The giant beast smashed through the layer of ice under its feet. Everyone was horrified to find that cracks were spreading out from under their feet like a spider web. Let's go! Mayas roared loudly, leading everyone in a mad dash forward. Let's go, let's go, let's go! Ali yelled. The ice under their feet continued to shatter. Everyone raised their chi and flew forward. Only then did Ming Yas remember that Lil Thing had already disappeared from his bosom. When he looked up again, he saw a snow-white little guy struggling to escape through the cracks in the ice. More importantly, she was holding a Snow Domain Divine Flower in her mouth. At this moment, Ming Yas was angered to the point of laughter by this little thing. He's quite greedy. Even at the last moment of his life, this guy still refused to let go of the Snow Domain Divine Flower in his mouth, running for his life in a hurry. His lips curled into a sneer. Little guy, you've really pissed me off. Akira took the lead and chased after the little guy, shooting several arrows in succession. The corners of Ali's eyes couldn't help but twitch. It was mainly because he saw that the little beast in front of him was actually moving in a very coquettish manner. The S-shaped path it took was simply breathtaking. Chapter 2362. However, she leaped into a crack in the ice wall and popped out with her head raised. All of Akira's arrows landed on the ice, so how could they hit her? Akira, on the other hand, was infuriated. She followed behind the little critter and cursed incessantly. She angrily roared, "Stop right there, little beast. Bah! You'd be an idiot if you stopped. How many freaking arrows have you shot already? A total of 12 arrows. This miss has formed a grudge with you. Just you wait." When Miss recovers her female form, I'll F***king press you to death. Awoo! Awoo! The little wolf cub's howls kept coming out of the little critter's mouth. The corners of Ali's eyes twitched uncontrollably. He turned to look at his expressionless and uncertain elder brother and coughed lightly. Big brother, I think this little critter is quite nimble. Don't tell me you ordered it to take this snowfield divine flower. Get out of the way first. Styx glanced at him indifferently. The look in his eyes was as if he was looking at an idiot. It couldn't be any more obvious. Ali rubbed his nose with a helpless expression. The remaining 800 personal guards also took out bows and arrows from their inner worlds and aimed in the direction Arbor was fleeing. Wait. For some reason, Styx's heart couldn't help but skip a beat, and he subconsciously reached out to stop his stupid subordinates. The stupid guards all stopped what they were doing and looked at His Highness with a stunned expression. Was His Highness going to let this little critter go? But they had fought so hard for so long and lost 200 to 300 brothers. Were they going to let this trash little critter take advantage of them when they finally plucked the snowfield divine flower? Akir, who was running at the front, was about to go crazy from Jojo's anger. Every time she shot an arrow, it either nailed into the ice or bounced back. After shooting more than 10 arrows in a row to no avail, she was so angry that she snapped the bow in her hand in two and threw it on the ground. The ice beneath her feet rumbled and swayed, and then it suddenly cracked. Akir reflexively flew up. With a furious roar, she pounced toward Arbor, who was in the crevice of the ice. Damn woman! Jojo Sama was furious. She turned her head and glared angrily at Akir with her round black beady eyes. Then, with a leap, she moved from one crack to another. He stared with a slight chill in his heart. Akir had shattered the crack in the ice where he had been crouching. F***ck. If it wasn't for the fact that I ran away quickly, I would have turned into minced meat by now. You bitch. Jojo, Sama will remember you. In the future, I will definitely make you return everything to Jojo. Wow. She pounced and dodged another attack. When she landed, her hind legs couldn't help but twitch. Holding the snow domain divine flower in its mouth, it turned its head and looked at its leg claws. He couldn't help but vomit blood from anger. His wound had been wrapped in gauze for less than a day. After being chased all the way here, it had split open again. This weak chicken body, Jojo hated it. Woo woo woo. Yas coldly watched for a while before catching up to Akir and saying coldly, Wait. What are you waiting for, brother Yas? Are you still going to protect this lowly little dumb beast? It's a thief, a thief. Akir shrieked. She had chased it all the way, but she couldn't even kill a little dumb beast. This dealt a huge blow to Akir's spirit. She was about to go crazy from anger. In any case, she had successfully broken through to the spiritual realm with the help of spiritual herbs and elixirs. Moreover, she had mastered a kind of earth spiritual power. Chapter 2363. But now, she couldn't even deal with a country bumpkin little critter. She was really going to be angered to death. Yossi knew what she was thinking. Wasn't she just flying into a rage out of humiliation? Useless fellow, getting angry at a little critter that hasn't even gained sentience. Yossi impatiently waved her away and coldly gazed at Abba, who was hiding in a crack in the ice. Come here. Bah. Do you think I can pounce on you like a puppy just because you call out to me? Miss Chow coldly gazed at Yossi in front of her, calculating her escape route. She was small, and there were cracks in the ice everywhere. She could just slip in and hide for a while. Humph, let's see how he'll catch her. But with her injured leg, she really couldn't run anymore. Unless she wanted to be legless for the rest of her life. Ah, bah, bah, bah. She didn't want to be trapped in this weak little critter's body for the rest of her life. She wanted to return. Unable to understand what was flickering in this little bean's eyes, Yossi impatiently shouted, I advise you to hurry up and come here. I know you can understand human language. Understand your sister. Asterisk whoosh. Chow Mu darted up and nimbly rolled and pressed into a crevice in a flash. Wait. Yossi's pupils contracted slightly. With a crisp crack, the ice layer, which had already stopped moving, began to crack even more violently, as though Jojo had triggered a mechanism. Damn it! Yossi was anxious and angry, but he also felt an inexplicable sense of amusement. This little critter knew quite a lot. It actually chose the weakest part of the ice to stomp on. Under the shaking, everyone had no choice but to rise into the air again. Akir also jumped into the air with everyone and looked down at the little critter, who was scurrying back and forth on the ice layer. She was so angry that her pretty face was flushed red. Little critter, you're doing this on purpose. Yossi coldly gazed at the little critter on the ice layer, and a divine power suddenly circled around his hand. A strong suction force squeezed toward Arbor. Miss Chow had been sucked by him many times, so she was already on guard. When she saw him raise his hand, she shrank into one of the ice caves and slid over like a mole. From another cave, she popped her head out with a whoosh. Ming Yossi was speechless. He had the urge to choke her to death and stew her soup. What should he do? This little guy is too hateful. It was so hateful that it made him gnash his teeth in anger. Jojo did not care about his expression. Instead, he slid from one cave to the other and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. Chase. Doc Yass gritted his teeth and roared in a low voice. If he were to let this little fellow slip away right under his nose, then he wouldn't be able to survive. Ayo! The little guy's little ears twitched as he listened to the sound of galloping hooves from afar. Someone was coming. Although she didn't know if it was a friend or foe, she still inexplicably rolled towards the source of the sound. That's right. Basically, get lost. F***CK, Jojo was about to die from anger. To think that she, the great Jojo, had to roll in order to protect her short legs, which were about to become crippled. She might as well roll fast. There were many caves in the broken ice here. She zigzagged from cave to cave, and her speed and agility made Alex and the others gasp in amazement. This little mink had become an immortal. Everyone cursed in their hearts. How could there be such a nimble mink? Chapter 2364. How was this still a ferret? This was simply a divine ferret. Sir Jojo rolled about and finally sensed that the sound of hooves was getting closer and closer to her. When she looked up, she was so moved that tears almost streamed down her face. F***CK, it was Duanyu. Duanyu came to save her. Duanyu, woo-woo, Duanyu. The little fellow rolled all the way over, but she still didn't forget to hold that snow domain divine flower in her mouth. With a leap, she hurriedly pounced at Duanyu's handsome face, who was dashing over. Oh! It was Duanyu. He was her big brother. Hurry and save me. Sir Jojo's pounce just so happened to land on Duanyu's nose, causing him to almost suck in a mouthful of fur. Duanyu hastily pulled that little fellow off his face and looked down in bewilderment. He happened to meet her pair of clever, beady black eyes. This was a ferret? But wasn't this ferret's gaze a bit too rich? Looking at her wet eyes, he saw a pitiful look. She raised her little head and stared straight at him. That gaze was filled with the expression of, I finally found my biological brother I haven't seen in 800 years. Duanyu couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He felt that this ferret's gaze was very playful. Moreover, when their gazes met, Duanyu was inexplicably stunned by her gaze. Seriously, what the hell? Duanyu didn't have the energy to retort, but his slender fingers picked up the little fellow. Then he saw the transparent, glazed, spherical flower in the little fellow's mouth. Wait a minute. Wasn't this the Snow Domain Divine Flower? He knew that the Snow Domain Divine Flower would lose its attacking power after being plucked. But the problem was, where did this weak beast pluck the Snow Domain Divine Flower? Could it be that she wasn't as weak as she looked? Duanyu reflexively reached out to take the Snow Domain Divine Flower in her mouth. Our dear Chow Mu immediately shrunk back defensively and glared indignantly at Duanyu with a pair of accusatory eyes. Damn Duanyu, Sir Jojo misjudged you. You actually want to fight tribulation. Want black. Eat black. Duan Yu inexplicably sensed a trace of disdain and contempt from the depths of her eyes, and he couldn't help chuckling. He reflexively raised his hand to pat her small head. At the same time, the ice layer finally stopped shaking. It was just that this ice layer had turned from smooth and flat to broken pieces full of scars and cracks. If one was not careful, one could fall through the cracks. Ming Yasi chased over with his men, and he immediately saw the little beast curled up in Duan Yu's hand. After sizing up Duan Yu with his dark eyes, Ming Yasi sneered and said, "So it's Cangzhou's Prince Chen." Duan Yu looked up at him with an indifferent expression. "Your Highness the Underworld State's Crown Prince, I've heard a lot about you." The two of them looked cold and distant as if they were meeting for the first time. "Stop pretending. Don't you guys know each other?" Jojo retorted inwardly. She subconsciously pulled at Duan Yu's palm and jumped into his arms with a swish. Still holding the Snow Domain Divine Flower in her mouth, she vigilantly glanced at Akir, who was glaring at her across from her. "Stinking woman! What are you glaring at?" Ming Yasi's eyes flashed with a trace of anger that he himself didn't notice as he watched the little weakling shrink into Duan Yu's arms and abandon him. For some reason, he just didn't feel comfortable in his heart. He was clearly the one who discovered this little weakling first, so why should someone else beat him to it? Chapter 2365. Prince Chen, I'm truly sorry. My family's little beast is rather mischievous. It scampers everywhere and isn't shy with strangers. Please return it to me. Yasi coldly said to Duan Yu while suppressing his anger. Duan Yu looked down at the weak mink holding the flower in his arms before looking up to glance at Yasi. Do you have proof? What? Yasi only felt a surge of anger from the bottom of his heart, and his entire person also turned cold. I said, what proof do you have to prove that she's your little beast? Yasi gritted his teeth. What the hell could this ownerless little beast use as proof? This was merely a low-level Mystic Realm little beast. Who knew if it had surpassed level 3 Mystic Beasts? Proof? He clearly knew that it was impossible to prove, yet he said such things. This Duan Yu was indeed unbelievably cunning. Arbor hid in Duan Yu's arms and repeatedly nodded its little head in support of Duan Yu. That's right, what proof do you have to prove that this Lord Xiao is your beast? If you don't have proof, scram. Akir placed her hands on her hips and shouted angrily, whoever wants this little beast can take it away. But we sacrificed many people's lives to obtain that Snow Domain's divine flower with great difficulty. It must be returned to its rightful owner. It turned out that this little fellow had obtained this Snow Domain's divine flower in passing. Oh no, it was in passing. As a habitual offender, how could Miss Qiao return the flower in her mouth to someone else? That was absolutely impossible. Her beady black eyes stared vigilantly at Akir across from her. That look of his shocked everyone in the room. This truly was an exotic mink. They had never seen such a greedy mink. You're just a low-level little mystic beast. How could you chew this Snow Domain's divine flower? Why don't you try? They could even write their names backwards if they didn't make you explode and die in minutes. Little furball, come here. Duan Yu extended a hand in front of the little ferret. Miss Qiao's eyes instantly brimmed with fury. That gaze was simply ruthless. This D*MN Duan Yu was itching for a beating. What kind of nickname did he give her? What kind of freaking name was Little Furball? Also, he actually stared at her so directly. He actually extended his hand toward her with the Snow Domain's divine flower in his mouth? Shameless. He wanted to rob Jojo's Snow Domain's divine flower again. Duan Yu, I was wrong about you. You actually dared to rob Lord Jojo. The little ferret's furious gaze made Duan Yu somewhat embarrassed. Inexplicably, he explained to her, look, this Snow Domain divine flower loves the cold. Now that you're holding it in your mouth, its stem and leaves are wilting. It's going to die soon. A pair of black bean eyes glanced at the flower. Sure enough, the flower was wilted and looked like it was about to wither. Weakling! Jojo cursed in his heart. You're so weak. How can you have the face to be a saint medicine? Although he was cursing in his heart, he still couldn't bear it. He could not let such a rare divine flower of the snow region die. Sir Jojo looked up at Duan Yu with a "don't lie" expression. He glared at Duan Yu with his beady eyes. Duan Yu said in amusement, "Don't worry, I'll store this snow domain's divine flower in a jade box for you. I won't snatch it from you. This is your snow domain's divine flower." It was only then that Jojo nodded and spat the flower into his hand. There were even a few drops of suspicious liquid hanging from the flower stem. It was sparkling and translucent. Duan Yu secretly twitched his mouth. Chapter 2366. With a lift of his wrist, he placed that snow domain's divine flower into a long jade box. He grinned as he waved the jade box in front of the little fellow. "Do you want to pick it up?" "Pick your sister. Are you retarded? Who wants to pick up an ice-cold jade box? It's longer than her ball-like body." This guy was definitely mocking her on purpose. Don't be fooled by how she was usually all smiles and looked like she would laugh at anyone. In reality, she was very wicked. "Then leave it with me for now." Duan Yu was still grinning as he withdrew his fingers and stored this jade box into his inner world. Sir Jojo had a bad premonition. Duan Yu's fox-like smile really looked like he wanted to embezzle her snow domain's divine flower. Ow! The little fellow pounced at his face. Duan Yu was already prepared, so he swiftly picked up her small body and stuffed her into his arms with a helpless expression. All right, I'll give it to you when we return. What's the rush?" Ming Yossi's handsome face darkened. At his signal with his eyes, a group of personal guards swiftly surrounded Duan Yu in the center. "What are you doing?" Duan Yu grinned at Ming Yossi's face that was smeared with a layer of charcoal. "You want to fight with me? You can take the snow domain's divine flower, but you have to leave my little pet beast behind." Ming Yossi's face was cold, and he practically enunciated every word when he said the last sentence. He simply didn't understand why he had such intense emotions. It was as if he would regret it for the rest of his life if he didn't leave this little pet beast behind. Although he didn't understand why he had such thoughts, he had always been someone who followed his heart. He could just find another snow domain's divine flower if it was gone, but he had to keep this little beast with such a dramatic gaze. Xiao Mu turned to glance at Ming Yossi before swiftly shrinking back into Duan Yu's lapel. Her heart was brimming with anger as she inwardly mused, "This Ming Yossi definitely wants to take revenge on Xiao Xiao for stealing his flower. Don't think Jojo doesn't know what he's planning. Don't think of making Jojo go back." "Big brother Yas!" Akir couldn't help but scream. Akir's eyes were filled with malicious fury as she stared at the little white mink in Duan Yu's arms. She wished for nothing more than to immediately rush up and tear that little beast to shreds. She simply couldn't understand why Yas, who was usually quite wise and far-sighted, would care so much about that little beast. In Yas's eyes, that trash little beast was even more precious than a snow domain divine flower? How could this be? She must be hallucinating. "Shut up, Akir," ACI impatiently shouted at her before turning to glare at Duan Yu and coldly ordering, "Leave it to me." Duan Yu exuded an indolent aura, and the polar ice wolf he was riding on was very unfriendly as it repeatedly flashed its claws at ACI. Ownerless little beasts are everywhere. They belong to whoever gets their hands on them. Duan Yu giggled as he lowered his head to gently press the little fellow's head. "Moreover, she seems to like sticking to me." Bah, arrogant. That was because he had no other choice. The little fellow crawled her claws on his lapel and impatiently urged, "Hurry up and leave. Don't waste your breath. Hold on, look at how others look like they want to pick a fight. How can I, the dignified Prince Chen of Congzhou, boost other people's morale and diminish my own prestige?" Ming Yossi angrily drew his sword, a hint of gloom pressing down on his brows. You are courting death. Broken dreams. Chapter 2367. Looking at the fellow in front of him who confidently said, "She likes to cling to me more," Ming Yasi was infuriated to the extreme. That's right, as long as one wasn't blind, they could see that this little beast was indeed clinging tightly to Duan Yu's clothes with a begging to be taken away expression on its face. Of course, this begging to be taken away was purely Ming Yasi's conjecture. Just seeing that dumb beast snuggling in Duan Yu's arms and warily looking at him with its beady black eyes made Ming Yasi's displeasure boil to the extreme. Bang! The sword in his hand slashed out a stream of air that abruptly exploded under Duan Yu's feet. Who exactly is the one courting death? Duan Yu leaped up with a grin. The two of them leaped onto a protruding ice wall at the speed of light and exchanged over 100 blows without any explanation. Duan Yu was never one to suffer a loss. Since the other party had already drawn their swords at him, how could he compromise and yield? Instead, it was Miss Chow who inexplicably broke out in a cold sweat for him. Be more reliable. Duan Yu. You mustn't lose this Lord Chow. She wasn't willing to go back with that exposing maniac, Yossi. The little fellow shrunk her head as she calculated Duan Yu's chances of winning. Duan Yu was alone right now, while the other party had more than 800 personal guards. This was clearly a huge disparity in strength. In addition, who knew what Ming Yossi ate as he grew up, but his cultivation had soared so much. She didn't even know if Duan Yu was his match. If Duan Yu couldn't defeat this Yossi, could it be that she would be captured by this Ming province's crown prince? When the two of them met earlier, one of them eccentrically called out, His Highness Prince Chen, while the other called out, Ming province's crown prince, in a strange tone. In the past, she really didn't expect that Duan Yu was actually the Zhongzhou's emperor's son who had wandered outside. Furthermore, this Yossi's true identity as the Aikido tribe's young chief was actually that Ming province's crown prince. While the little fellow was pondering, Duan Yu and Ming Yossi had already exchanged several hundred blows. Both of them leaped from the smooth ice wall to a place filled with icicles. While exchanging blows with spiritual energy, they also had to constantly pay attention to the situation beneath their feet. Miss Chow was somewhat surprised. Sure enough, when her cultivation was rising, everyone's cultivation was rising as well. She didn't need to worry about Duan Yu at all. This fellow hadn't even used his full strength yet, but he still had the strength to fight Ming Yas. After exchanging a few more blows, Duan Yu withdrew his hand dispiritedly and said indifferently, What kind of power did you use earlier? You've already sustained internal injuries. Right now, you should be returning to cultivate and meditating instead of continuing this unrealistic battle with me. MHM. Chow Mu poked her small head out and nodded in deep agreement. ACI glared at Duan Yu, his gaze involuntarily turning furious. Without another word, he reached out to grab Miss Chow's small head. This was simply unreasonable. Miss Chow glared at him angrily, and with a whoosh, she shrank her head back. Duan Yu couldn't resist laughing, and he abruptly swung out a water spirit whip to block Ming Yossi's attack. At the same time, a group of Zhongzhou guards who came with him also arrived. When they saw that their master was actually in conflict with that group from the Ming province, they hastily ran over to help. For a moment, the two sides were at daggers drawn. Duan Yu sneered, If you still don't retreat, I'm going to get serious. Chapter 2368. You should have been serious a long time ago. Miss Chow swept him a disgruntled glance as she mused, Hurry and deal with him so we can go home. Duan Yu lowered his head to glance at the little fellow. He saw her pair of small black eyes staring straight at him. Her watery eyes were quite amusing. You're hungry, right? Hungry my ass. Miss Chow couldn't be bothered with this idiot anymore. Yet Duan Yu was grinning as he suddenly stomped the ground. Tens of thousands of icicles exploded in an instant and were turned into balls of ice by the airflow around him. They flew up with a whoosh and split open between the two with a bang. Countless ice shards shattered into tiny ice shards that shot toward Dark Yas. Miss Chow could see everything clearly from hiding in his arms, and she couldn't help but gasp in amazement. Duan Yu, this guy, actually grasped the power of water spirit to the point of perfection. Seeing how he effortlessly converted the water spirit energy between heaven and earth for his own use, this person was simply a bit of a freak. Even Dark Yas at his peak might not be his match, let alone the current Dark Yas who couldn't even stand steadily. Your Highness! Akir had already cried out in alarm. Ali brought a few guards with him and flew up to support the swaying Dark Yas. Dark Yas's face was dark, but he was extremely furious on the inside. If it weren't for the fact that he had used the power of the Sword of Underworld Deity earlier and his body had yet to recover, how could he have suffered such a setback in front of Duan Yu? But right now, he was frustrated no matter what he said. If he couldn't win, he couldn't win. He already knew that he couldn't protect what he wanted if he wasn't strong enough. Dark Yas angrily swatted away Ali's hand and jumped down from the ice wall with Duan Yu. He reflexively covered his chest with his hand. Duan Yu turned around and coldly swept him a glance. The Zhongzhou guards had already swarmed up to protect their master in the center. Although they only had half the number of Ming Province's personal guards, their fierce eyes were extremely sharp. It was as if each of them could take on 100 enemies alone, and they were brimming with a baleful aura. Ming Province's crown prince. Today's exchange of pointers was to this prince's liking. Let's play again next time if there's a chance. Duan Yu waved his hand with a nonchalant expression as he turned to leave with the little fellow in his arms. The Zhongzhou guards were naturally not as magnanimous as their master. Each and every one of the Dark Province guards who were glaring at them like tigers watching their prey, turned around in a row, and retreated in a row. They stared at the Dark Province guards in front of them and protected their masters as they left. Of course, they were not very afraid that the people of the underworld continent would attack. Unless they wanted to die here, they could just attack. The heavenly ice and snow region was within the territory of the Zong state. It would be strange if the people of the underworld state dared to make a move. If they hurt Prince Chen, the emperor could send an army to crush them at any time. Ming Yas wasn't a fool. He had already thought of this. At this moment, she was staring at Duan Yu's group leaving with gloomy eyes. She clutched her arm that had been cut by the water spirit. His arm was not the only thing that was injured. In the last confrontation just now, that damned Prince Chen was indeed a powerful figure. Akir's eyes were red, and she looked like she was about to cry. Brother Yas, why were you so impulsive? She clearly knew that now was not the right time to fight with the people of the Zhongzhou, so why couldn't she keep her cool? Ming Yas coldly glanced at her before looking in the direction that Duan Yu left in a trance. He didn't speak for a long time. Chapter 2369. Seeing that Yasi didn't chase after her, Miss Chow inwardly sighed in relief. This guy was extremely troublesome. If she allowed him to continue pestering her, the one who would be annoyed would be her true self. Right now, her tiny body couldn't do anything. She was too weak to even jump up and scratch his face. Right now, her most important task was to find a place to settle down and sort out her current situation so that she could get herself dressed as soon as possible. Abba sighed powerlessly in her heart as she looked down at her chubby little paw. Go do what you need to do. Duan Yu aloofly instructed the Zhongzhou guards before bending down to enter the tent. He placed the little thing on a small table before his gaze landed on her injured little paw. Due to the torment along the way, the gauze had long fallen off, so her little paw was currently exposed to the air. Although it wasn't bleeding anymore, it still hurt terribly. Your Highness, Xiao Kezi anxiously called out upon hearing the commotion. MHM. Duan Yu didn't even look up when he heard his call. He merely took out a medicine bottle from his inner world and placed the little thing on his lap. He then lowered his head and applied medicine for her as if no one else was around. Abba glanced at that medicine bottle and stopped moving. She obediently lay there and allowed him to apply the medicine. This medicine was her exclusive prescription, and it was very effective. After applying it once today and again tomorrow, her injury would probably be 80% healed. Your Highness. When Xiao Kezi saw that Duan Yu was ignoring him, he hastily walked forward and circled Duan Yu's body several times. My Highness. All right, stop making a fuss. If you have something to say, say it. This servant heard that you encountered the Nether Province guards this time and almost met with danger, right? Xiao Kezi wailed. You really were in too much danger. Duan Yu carefully applied the medicine for the little fellow before looking up to meet his eyes. I'm fine. The implication was, stop making a fuss over there. Arbor also felt that this little eunuch was terribly noisy. She was lying there lazily. After fleeing for her life the entire way, she had long used up all the energy in her body. Right now, she just wanted to have a good rest, but there was a demonic voice nagging in her ears. How annoying! Fourth brother. A voice sounded from outside the tent. Not long after, two men walked in one after another with smiles on their faces. Duan Yu raised his eyes to look at those two people. He was smiling sarcastically on the inside, but he didn't show any expression on his face. Second royal brother, third royal brother, is something the matter? The second prince and the third prince looked at each other. The third prince smiled and said, I heard that you met with danger on the way. Are you all right? Duan Yu spread his hands. It's obvious that she's not injured. She's completely fine. That's good, that's good. The third prince laughed and glanced outside the tent. I don't know where Xiang Chong heard the news of your injury. She's so nervous that she's secretly crying. You have to comfort her later. Xiang Chong, come in. The woman who entered after hearing the sound had red eyes, as if she had just cried. She was dressed in a fiery red muslin robe and had a tall, jade-like nose. Her appearance was quite stunning. A phoenix hairpin wrapped with 8 jewels on her head was quite eye-catching under the swaying sunlight. The little fellow was lying there. She looked up at that beauty in red and sized her up curiously before looking away and continuing to laze around. Chapter 2370. Brother Ali. Commandery Princess Xiangchang called out with reddened eyes. She sized him up from head to toe. Thank goodness you're all right. Xiangchang was worried to death. Duan Yu blinked and absent-mindedly swept a glance at that Commandery Princess. Many thanks for the Commandery Princess's concern, but it's better for the Commandery Princess to call me His Highness Prince Chen. When Xiangchang heard this, half of her eyes immediately reddened again. She lowered her head and bit her lip, looking hurt. The third prince hastily smoothed things over. Fourth brother, that's not right. Xiangchang is the only daughter of Marquis Anxing. Marquis Anxing was conferred the title of Marquis by grandfather's generation, so he's quite related to our imperial family. That's right. We grew up with Xiangchang, so how can you treat her as an outsider? The second prince also interjected dryly. Miss Chow, who was lying on the side to watch the show, only felt that the 3 people before her were all idiots. As expected, Duan Yu slapped her in the face with the next sentence. That's you guys. Duan Yu swept a sardonic glance at his 2 elder brothers before his chilly gaze landed on Commandery Princess Xiangchang. I'm not familiar with her. The second prince and the third prince were choked to the point of speechlessness. Wasn't that true? This fourth brother had just returned to Congzhou not long ago. It was them and Xiangchang who grew up together, not fourth brother and Xiangchang. When they thought of this, the second and third princes could only awkwardly rub their noses and chuckle. Haha. Duan Yu reached out to pick up the little fellow who was sprawled on the table, causing her to glare at him in displeasure. She was lying here perfectly fine, so what was there to pick her up for? Don't think you can pick her up casually just because she's young. Duan Yu glanced at her with a grin and ignored her gaze. He turned around with her in his arms and threw a sentence at the second and third princes. If there's nothing else, my royal brothers, I'm going to rest. This was an order to chase them out. A trace of anger flashed across the 2 princes' faces. They were increasingly displeased with this unbridled fourth brother. However, they couldn't say anything right now. They could only hatefully fling their sleeves and growl at Xiangchang. "Xiangchang, let's go." How could Xiangchang Commandery Princess's eyes shift away from Duanyu? At this moment, she was staring at him with infatuation. How could she hear the second prince and the third prince's cries? When those two people saw Xiangchang's love-struck appearance, they were even more infuriated, so they simply abandoned her and left Duanyu's tent, slamming down the curtain. Ungrateful fellow! The third prince spat as soon as he stepped out of the door. They had come to see him in vain. They didn't expect him to be so rude to his elder brother. Second prince remained silent with a dark expression. He was naturally displeased with Duanyu in his heart. However, with his current status and the importance he received from Imperial Father, even if he wanted to make a move on him, he would have to assess the situation and plan before making a move. If he acted rashly, it would only make him more unlucky. "Xiangchang, let her be," the second prince said coldly. He was not very optimistic about that woman from Xiangchang. Just by looking at his fourth brother's cold attitude towards her, he knew that there was no chance. Unfortunately, that woman's brain wasn't good. She insisted on sticking to him and asking for humiliation. So be it. She would soon find out who was more suitable for her. If it weren't for giving face to Marquis and Xingho, he wouldn't care about a mere Xiangchang. The second prince thought coldly as he left with the third prince. However, the two people didn't know that Crown Prince Rongli was currently standing in a corner of the tent wearing a thick brocade cloak and coldly watching them leave. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.